The opening mission of Marvel's Avengers perfectly encapsulates the reasons that we love superheroes.
Take it back. They've got pulsar tanks.
Cut off!
Captain, we have a problem!
I know, Doc. They're trying to hijack the Chimera.
Not that!
Whoa, cut, stop, hold your horses. While they're fun in their own right, you can keep the action set pieces to yourself, man. I wasn't talking about all that stuff. I was actually talking about this.
We're approaching the Avengers West Coast headquarters on the left, and we'll be touching down on the Chimera surface.
Today's celebration.
The introduction to Kamala Khan does an immaculate job of reminding the player why they fell in love with superheroes in the first place, whether that came in comic book form or on the big screen. In many ways, Kamala's character and personality is an outward reflection of us, the nerdy players who have never missed a superhero movie's opening night. On a personal level, my love of Marvel began, ironically, with The Dark Knight. At the time, I was a junior in college, and I decided to give the then 6-year-old movie a shot. I fell in love with The Dark Knight, and I probably watched it 15 times that year, as well as Batman Begins and The Dark Knight Rises. Once I exhausted that epic trilogy of movies, I moved on to Marvel films. I had seen a handful of them, but I wasn't invested like so many already were, even in 2014. I started from the very beginning, and I watched all the way through each available movie, and I was hooked to the action, but more importantly, I was hooked to the characters. My first time seeing Avengers Infinity War is still my favorite cinema-going experience of all time. Easily one of the best moments of 2018. Okay, so let's be real. You probably don't care about why I love superhero movies, but I'm establishing it because I hope it's something that you can connect with, and so that you can see it holds merit when I say, I love superheroes. And I see that part of me reflected in this game's opening mission. It was critical for Crystal Dynamics to draw this feeling out of the player, to get them on board for this game, and it worked. And it's a feeling that kind of just crept up on me right after I finished this opening section, and after a week of stewing on why, I think I've narrowed it down to 3 reasons. So, without further ado, this is why the opening mission of Marvel's Avengers captures our love of superheroes so perfectly. So, even in some of the more negative reviews of this title, they all still cite one beacon of light that uplifted the experience, and that happens to be the newcomer, Kamala Khan. And that is truly earned. She's one of the best video game characters of 2020. It should be unsurprising then that 2 of my 3 reasons center around Kamala herself, but they relate to different components of her personality. So the first of the 3 reasons why this game captures our love of superheroes is that Kamala Khan's fandom of all things Avengers is something that the player can relate to and connect with. At the mission's outset, she's being brought to S.H.I.E.L.D.'s newest pride and joy, a massive helicarrier called the Chimera. She and her father are on their way to a convention where a finalist will be picked in a create-your-own comic book competition. Kamala's first glance at the new West Coast HQ for the Avengers puts a massive smile on her face, and once the aircraft lands, she's the first to run for the exit and wait for the door to open. To me, that's one of the most defining things we witness for establishing her love of superheroes. She doesn't care what other people think of her, and refuses to tone down her excitement just to accomplish the cool and casual look that so many people within her age range try to regularly maintain. She unapologetically loves superheroes, and she cannot wait another moment to get out of this plane and soak up all of the day's awesome interactions. It's a small character detail that we're shown, not told, and it will be built upon throughout this sequence, and it's off to a great start. From here, Kamala learns that she can gain access to a VIP balcony if she collects all 5 comic books, and it's a task that kind of structures this opening mission. So right off the bat, one little detail I noticed is that if you go idle for a bit, you can't help but notice that Kamala is constantly moving her head back and forth in awe. She just wants to fully absorb all things Avengers, including shops, games, and displays. She's mesmerized by it in a way that only young people can be, and I'm sure you can recall a memory like this in your own life. From here, you're set free in this environment to collect all 5 comic books. The first one is gathered after beating a mini-game where you shoot at bad guys, and take notice of the detail in Kamala's animation as she can't help but to jump for joy after scooping up the comic. It's clear that she treasures this comic intrinsically for its own worth as an addition to her collection, just as much as she does for its extrinsic meaning tied to this particular day, that being granting access to the VIP balcony. In many ways, it reflects our love of building up our own collection of superhero trinkets, comics, and accessories. She goes around completing more and more mini-games, and in each of them we get to see just how excited she is to collect the comic and measure herself against her favorite heroes. She yells out in celebration after completing the Hulk minigame by saying she's as strong as the Hulk, and she's hyped after getting Thor's hammer to budge in this minigame. There's also the displays you can stumble upon that Kamala is obsessed with seeing up close and personal. I mean, there's no greater compliment from a child than having them excitedly call something cool, and Kamala does that a ton throughout this mission. She even will provide additional information and commentary, stuff that she undoubtedly picked up on in all the time she spent researching everything about the Avengers. By far, though, the thing that obviously sends Kamala through the roof is the chance to interact with her heroes. She encounters all 5 of this game's main cast of Avengers throughout this day, and she's starstruck by all of them. She's in awe of seeing the people she's fantasized about meeting for her whole life right in front of her very eyes. She fangirls and geeks out in the same way that many of us would if we had the chance to meet Tony Stark or Steve Rogers in real life. It would be a dream come true for those of us who have spent years adoring these characters throughout the comics and the films. It's another moment where we can connect with Kamala and understand what she's feeling. But the writers also did a fantastic job of showing us that these moments aren't too big for Kamala to handle, and she keeps her cool enough to actually interact with the Avengers, and this in part endears her to them. And that actually makes for a good moment to transition into my second point. So we've now established Kamala's fandom of the Avengers and the joy she gets from seeing all of these characters, displays, and games in person. And it's the same feeling we get after watching a new Marvel movie for the first time. We can understand Kamala's happiness and her excitement because, well, we've been there ourselves. Of course, this game will go on to make Kamala a fully playable Avenger, And so it's important for this mission to establish characteristics and inspirations within her to make her transition into a superhero feel natural and expected. It also calls out to our own desires to be like the superheroes we see on the big screen. And that brings me to my second reason for why this game captures our love of superheroes. It establishes the fandom, yes, but then it takes it beyond that by delivering a character who shares in our desires to be like the superheroes we love, instead of just worshipping them. Taking inspiration from these characters and finding ways to incorporate their sense of justice and good nature is something that a lot of us Marvel fans have tried to do in our everyday lives. Not only does Kamala love the Avengers, but just like us, she loves what they stand for, and she's inspired to be like them, and this introduction to her establishes just that. It starts out like so many other superhero stories do, with a motivational quote that will deliver inspiration to the character throughout their highs and lows. While heading for the Chimera, Kamala and her father discuss her anxiety about potentially losing the competition, but the Elder Khan inspires her with this quote.
Always be good, Abu.
Oh, Beta. Good isn't a thing you are.
It's a thing you do.
That's my good.
It's clearly a message he's hammered home to his young daughter, and it's something that continues to inspire her as the game goes on, as we come to see. It instills a strong moral compass within her and reminds her to always do what is right. Kamala also shares some pivotal moments with the Avengers that go a long way in developing her confidence as a hero once she gets her powers. The most important of these conversations come with her interactions with Thor and later with Captain America and Black Widow. Like I mentioned before, she is starstruck by Thor and his awesome might, but despite the God of Thunder's gloating personality, she's actually able to hold her own in conversation. The pivotal moment comes when Thor posits that his natural power is much more impressive than Tony's trinkets, but Kamala rebuttals by stating that every hero has to start somewhere. Thor is befuddled by this remark, but ends up agreeing with Kamala, and that's got to be a moment that inspired her. It doesn't matter where you start, anyone can be a hero. Without a doubt though, Kamala's most impressive push for displaying that heroic quality that we all try to emulate is her handling of a couple bullies in Captain America's stand. After fangirling out for a few seconds, a couple of older kids insist that Kamala get out of their way to make room for high-caliber finalists. Kamala is only taken back for a few seconds before channeling her confidence.
And the mob, and the press, and the whole world tell you to move. You plant yourself like a tree beside the river of truth, and you say no. You move.
What?
Who said that? A real fan would.
I love this moment because, of course, she references the famous Captain America line and uses it as a way to gather herself while confronting the bullies. It simultaneously demonstrates her fandom while also showing that she has the natural confidence and ability to stand up for herself. It's a trait that all heroes must have. This of course leads into an awesome conversation with Captain America and Black Widow, where she even aids in pointing the Avengers towards Thor's location. The praise she receives from her idols in this sequence, as well as Iron Man later on, gives Kamala confidence going forward and makes her feel like a superhero in the making. It's an inspirational and relatable feeling for any fan of superhero content. And finally, the last factor that captures our love of superheroes is simply the environment that we're set free in to explore. So, what's the first thing you do when you get home after seeing a new Marvel film? Well, besides buying your tickets for a second showing, you go straight to YouTube and you look up all those Easter eggs that you missed in the film. And this comic book celebration on the Chimera is chock full of obvious and hidden references to all things Marvel. Obviously, this location has been set up to be a celebration of all things Avengers. There's massive booths dedicated to each of the heroes. Black Widow gets her own shooter minigame where the player must use high-tech gauntlet blasters to destroy bad guys. The Hulk gets the most eye-popping game in the arcade. Iron Man has a massive shop where people can buy t-shirts and books and more. And oh, he also has this virtual reality minigame that is unfortunately impossible to play. A real missed opportunity there. And then of course Captain America gets a good old-fashioned display that shows off some of his history, including his first shield and his outfits, along with a lot of cool history lessons. And finally, Thor gets his own epic minigame where kids of all ages get to try to wield Mjolnir. All of these sections are great fun to explore for Marvel fans. They're tiny moments that we can connect with and love. But of course, when we pull out our magnifying glasses, we can also discover a bunch of hidden little details. I'm not going to tell you that I found all of them, but here's a few of the ones that I noticed and that instantly put a smile on my face. One of the food stands that you can find sells shawarma, which is of course a reference to the ending of the Avengers, where the gang goes out to eat this dish after stopping Loki. And in the Iron Man shop, if you closely examine the high scores on the virtual reality game, you may notice a few familiar names. I noticed Rhodey's name, Vision's name, Pepper Potts' name, and Sam Wilson's name at just a glance. Clint, aka Hawkeye, even has his initials marked in the high scores, but surprisingly he's not number 1 in this shooting-based game. That spot is actually reserved for Pepper Potts, and maybe that's a reference to her rescue suit. Maybe she's just dominant at this game because she has first-hand experience flying one of Tony's creations. And finally, within the arcade, you can find a bunch of machines that reference the Avengers. Like I said, I'm sure I missed some of the other little Easter eggs, so if you picked up on any, let me know in the comments below. So, these 3 elements, Kamala's fandom, her superhero personality, and the environment we explore, are the 3 factors that allow the opening mission of Marvel's Avengers to feel so special to longtime Marvel fans. Sure, it's always great to fly around as Iron Man, or smash things up as the Incredible Hulk, but as any comic book fan can attest to, we fall in love with the characters, not necessarily the action. Kamala Khan is incredibly likable, in part because we can relate to her massive fandom towards the Avengers, but also because she shares some of the traits that define our favorite heroes. When you take a character that's as pleasant as her and set her free in an environment that's chock full of overt and subtle references to all things Marvel, you have a recipe for success. So, despite all the ho-hum reviews, I've actually found myself enjoying Marvel's Avengers, and quite a bit, to be honest with you. And it kind of sounds dirty to say because I know there's been a lot of negative feedback from this game, but I like it. And I think a big reason for that is because this opening mission, lasting only about 20 minutes or so, was able to win me over. It seized the moment and aroused that same joyous feeling in me that so many Marvel movies have over the years. If you made it to this part in the video, thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like if you enjoyed it, consider subscribing for more, follow me on Twitter @NopeNapNarp, and as always, have a nice day, and take care.